Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Warner. My wife and I are light partners, as are all of you. And we welcome you to the Thursday night call of the Co-Creators Convergence community. We're always excited to spend our Thursday evening in this particular circle with amazing guests, healers, authors, and people that are doing amazing work in the world. Today is February 4th, 2021. And we welcome you to this Barbara Marx Hubbard Legacy Group that's dedicated to giving our unique gift to the shift in humanity, thereby co-creating a world that works for everyone. I'm going to put a little description for Co-Creators Convergence in our chat, so you have that available, and also the 4 ways to be engaged in this community, which include our Thursday evening calls, our active Facebook page, our website, which has archives of all of our calls going all the way back to for 6 years now, and also our annual gathering at Sunrise Ranch, which was hesitated in 2020, and we'll see whether it happens in 2021. If so, it would be the 9th annual. So we're excited to have Dr. Catherine Swan Reimer with us this evening, and without further ado, I'm going to ask Annie Spade and Zachary Johnson to introduce our guests this evening. We look forward to a great dialogue. Annie?
Thank you, Bob. Yes. Wow, I am just so delighted and honored to introduce Dr. Catherine Reimer, and she'll be sharing some significant moments from her journey and so much of the undergirding of what she has accomplished in her life. So it's kind of a backwards introduction in a way, that I will introduce her as having earned her doctorate in psychology and education. She has taught at the university level. She has counseled, and she works as a therapist and spiritual director. Also, she's a poet and artist, and a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, so an esteemed elder in her community. And of course, these days, your community is not non-local. So Dr. Catherine's many accomplishments precede her, but we would like to hear more about her roots. And she's written 3 books, and her most recent one is an autobiography that delves us deeply into these roots. And so we look forward to the treat of hearing more about her rich background tonight.
Okay. I can only add that I'm also honored to be a part of Dr. Reimer's introduction. We have come to know her and admire her work and admire her example. And just too many to speak of in a short time. But one of her most interesting accomplishments was a book she wrote for counselors back in 1995. It's called Counseling the Inuit Eskimos. The foreword was written by a doctor named Joseph Trimble. Congratulates her on her dedication, perseverance, and commitment to introducing the voice and stories of the Inuit-speaking people of Alaska. At a time when this community was suffering from the residual effects of their history, Dr. Reimer became a voice for the voiceless. So we're honored this evening to be able to share her message. And she asked that she be introduced, at least in part, with her Native American name. So at this point, let's all welcome Dr. Catherine Swan Singh Reimer. Hope I said that right.
Unmute, Catherine.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here, and I want to say hello to everyone. And I want to also thank Noelle and Bob and Zach, and Annie for allowing me to present tonight. It's a great honor. It's the first time I've introduced my book publicly. It took me 30 years to release it. I wrote it back when I was getting my master's for a class assignment, and then I rewrote it with more details. And I held on to it because of our Inupiaq values, which say honor your parents. And I always had a hard time with that. How do you honor your parents if you tell the story and if there's been alcohol in it? And so I just held on to it for a long time. And then finally, I resolved the issue. And I had a wonderful Inupiaq man who I trusted as an elder and all to read it and to validate it. And he did. So first of all, I'd like to share a little bit about myself. I'm the daughter of Elizabeth Swan, and my dad is Charlie Maxwell. And my mother is full Inupiaq, and my dad is Russian, Lithuanian, and German Jew. I didn't find out about German Jew until later in my life. I think I was in my 70s. I'm 81 now. And I found out from some research that was done by my nephew. And I was always told that there were secrets in the closet by my aunt, my dad's sister, but I never knew what they were. I live here in Chewelah, Washington. I'm surrounded by turkeys, wild turkeys. We have about 80 wild turkeys. Tonight I was watching them with this beautiful music and they were running all over. And I thought, what are they doing? And they looked like they were dancing out in the snow. And I couldn't figure out what they were doing. And then finally I saw that my husband was throwing breadcrumbs to them and they were responding. Every night he feeds about 30 of the deer. So I'm surrounded by beauty. We have a stream and little cabins where two little she sheds, and one is a place where we go and pray, and it's right by the stream. So with that, I would like to, I'm retired now, and I still do some trainings, but as an elder and as a Inupiaq, it's our custom to start with a prayer, a blessing. And so with your permission, I would like to do that. Thank you, Creator, for this moment that we have together. Open our hearts and open our minds. And thank you for accompanying us through this journey. And we ask blessings on everybody here. And we ask that your spirit just open our hearts and our understanding as you breathe life into us and fill us with so many good things. And we ask a blessing on this land. And I ask the ancestors of this land that I may speak in a proper way and that we will receive the blessings as well. In this I pray in Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. Also, in the Inupiaq culture, or when I do Native American trainings, we always tell a joke because some of the things may get heavy as I share my book. And so I have something that I memorized at one time, but I probably would forget some of it now. But I told the joke at a conference, at a workshop I was training Native Americans in, and there were some elders there. And I don't think they caught the joke because at the end, one came up to me and said, "Don't you think you're a little old for this?" So let me tell you the joke and you'll see why. Okay. Dear son, I have become a little older since I saw you last, and a few changes have come into my life since then. Frankly, I have become a frivolous old gal. I'm seeing 5 gentlemen every day. As soon as I wake up, willpower helps me get out of bed. Then I go see John. Then Charlie Horse comes along. And when he is here, he takes a lot of my time and attention. When he leaves, arthritis shows up and stays the rest of the day. He doesn't like to stay in one place very long, so he takes me from joint to joint. After such a busy day, I'm really tired and glad to go to bed with Ben Gay. What a life. Oh yes, I'm also flirting with Alzheimer. And so these ladies came and thought I was really a very wild old lady. All right, I'm going to share tonight my book, The Chrysalis, Maven, White, and One Breath. As I'm sharing this, I want each of you to think of what it would be like for you to write your story, your memories, your memoir. Because each of you do have a story to tell. We're all storytellers. We've all been on a journey, and the journey usually has some climaxes in it. It has some strong teachings. It has drama. It has all of these things that they're there in our lives. And there's always a theme, and maybe many themes. So maybe if you could get a pencil and paper or pen and ink, if you're at your desk, just get it. So you might want to jot some things down. So we have this story of ourselves written in the lens of time. And writing the story helps us to become objective and trace the fingerprints of God guiding us, never deserting us. He's always leading us, and he participates in our story. It may never be published, but because you've written it, it becomes a family treasure. Your relatives, your family, your friends, the people you share it with will begin to know a lot about you, but a lot about themselves too, because we carry within our DNA the memories and ways of being, our personality. They're all coming from the DNA of our parents and our ancestors. And I've read some books where it said that we are here to redeem some of those memories, those experiences from the past, from our relatives, that we're on an ongoing journey, and that what we're doing today in some way helps those in the past as well. And so think about that, if you will, for a minute. Think about your life, of what really stands out. And if you could choose a theme, just have that in the back of your mind as I share my journey with my book. What would your theme be? What would the purpose of your book be? I decided to write this story because of something extraordinary that occurred to me in my painful life's journey. It was amazing to me on how God works, because I'd never heard of it. And as a Catholic, I never read about it. I never read about saints being healed this way. And so it was amazing to me that this should happen. I also felt a great need to explore my early beginnings. And as I said with my title, my native side and my white side, and putting it together in one breath. In fact, that was my original title of the book, and John said, add the chrysalis. He said, so much has happened to you, and the way you were, he says, you seem to have come out of a cocoon state into something that emerged, something quite different from the way you began. And that's how I got the title. I also wrote the book to help Native Americans who have also been traumatized and suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and who have similar pathways to the point of committing suicide. And as I was going through my life journey, there was that part of my life when the voices of death just beckoned me to come and join them, that I shouldn't be here. I didn't belong. And it was a very terrible, terrible time in my life. It was very frightening. And the suicides that happen to people, believe me, they are going through the darkest night of the soul. And you can't escape it as much as you want. But this incredible thing that happened to me, just, I couldn't believe it. It within a couple of hours, it was gone. That which lasted for so long. And on a positive note, it's your documentary of your life becomes history. It becomes something that your ancestors and your relatives can learn about. And if you don't even write it for them, write it for yourself, because what happens is you become objective on a very subjective subject, and that's your life. And how did you get there? Like Annie, how did you get to be a Montessori teacher? Now that, is quite a journey to begin there. And Zachary, how did you come to do that wonderful documentary and all the events that led up to it? So we see these parts that lead up to something magnificent. And how did we get there? And what were we like before we got there? And what was the guiding thing that opened us up to that place? So again, what would be your theme? What would be your purpose? And if an idea comes as I'm talking, write it down. We want everyone to participate in that conversation a little later. All my relatives also really enjoyed reading my book. And my brother, he says, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. He's like, it's hard for me to find time. So I put it in the bathroom. And he says, once a day I read your book. And he says, but he's corrected a couple of things for me. And he said he says, it was so wonderful to read it from your perspective, from a feminine point of view. And my kids, hi there, whoever is watching, of my children, it was also, when some read it, they said, I didn't know this about you. I didn't know you went through that. Or I remember parts of the things you told me, but now it's clear. And then my husband, when he read it, it was really beautiful. He just came up to me and he just held me, and he had tears in his eyes, and he says he just wanted to protect me. He said, from that childhood. So those are the things, those are the payoffs. Let me see, what else did I want to say? There's that question about how much do you delete when you're writing your story? How much do you share? I went through that. In fact, a Jesuit read it and he said, are you sure you want to share all these details? He says, he said, with your grandchildren. I'm looking at his picture right now, Father Nigro. I don't know if anyone knows him. But anyway, so I went back and I took some things out. You don't have to reveal all if it's your story. There's some things you want to reveal that are important for the story. And what else? Just as you write your story, remember, this is your life. And I have what we call the medicine wheel. And as I wrote my book, I realized that I did integrate these things into it. And I'm hoping that this talk isn't just about my book, but I'm hoping that it will encourage all of you to think about just beginning to write your story. You're younger now and you'll forget later. So at least write some memories down as you're doing it. And integrate your story with the wholeness of life, because you have much to say, but you might want to consider some of these things. And what I'm going to show is the medicine wheel. And the medicine wheel is a Native American way of teaching of becoming whole with mind, body, spirit, and emotion. When I was in Alaska and I did research on the Inupiaq's idea of well-being for my dissertation, I started thinking that there was more for us up there that should be in there because it's so important. And the other reason was because the research was showing that these things were there. And when I did training with just the medicine wheel, I would get, no, that's not the way it is for us, or things like that. And so when I introduced this, there was much more of a confirmation. Yeah, that represents us. And since I'm a Inupiaq, I use this quite a bit. And I'd like us to share that now, that medicine wheel, so you can just look at it for a minute. It's behind me right here.
Noelle's going to bring it up. Can everyone see that? A thumbs up? Yeah. Good.
So here you have it just a little different from the Indians down here. We always call them the ones down in the lower 48. Okay, so on the east we have the mind, because the mind is like the sun. It comes up, it rises, and its fullness. And it's our consciousness as well. And then the south is the body, and this is where healing comes from. And in the west, we have our emotions and our intuition. And I'd love to go into this longer, but because of our time, I'm going to make it shorter. And this is where it differs. We put social relationships, because the Inupiaq, our people, we think of ourselves as one, and that we help one another, and also the Indians down here. But it was important for them when I was doing this, that was up in the north, the social relationships. And in the middle is the spirit. And the reason the spirit is in the middle is because it touches the mind, doesn't it? It touches our body. Think of your body right now, just vibrating, full of life, full of energy, all the way down to your toes, your hands. Just feel them for a minute. Body, energy, life, your heart beating continually. And then your emotions. The spirit affects our emotions, and it gives us dreams and intuition. And then, come on, John. And then the social and relationships. The spirit helps with our emotions and our relationships as well. And that's the north. But also, that whole spirit reaches out further. And there we have the north, the east, south, west, and we have that outside the circle because we have our environment and nature, our trees. And when I was talking about our animals that are here, that impacts us right there, the nature. And so not only does the spirit impact that part of us, but also it impacts us. Nature does impact us, and we impact nature. Nature takes care of us. Are we taking care of her, our environment? And then further, we have the cosmos. and the stars and the moon and the universes. Those are all part of us. In fact, I read something like on Facebook, something about that we are made of the stars. So when you're writing your book, you might be thinking about this, about how did I develop? What was going on in my mind back then? How did I start to change? What was the human development changes that occurred in my thoughts? My husband is going to share a book about thoughts and the mind. I'm just going to introduce him later, but that's the direction he took. He focused on that mind. It's so powerful. And what about your body, and what happened to your body, and how did you manage, and all the things, experiences that came through that? And what about those emotions, intuitions, your dreams? How are you integrating that into your story? And then your social relationships, so very important, especially in our younger years. And how relationships impact us, and how the society impacts us, and how the nation impacts us, and how our government impacts us. I mean, that's all social relationship. How is that having an impact on us now? And then finally, the spirit flowing, ebbing in and out, always present, always participating in our life. It seems like the Creator just delights in being part of us, and we being part of Him. And then finally, how did nature impact you, your environment? And so we can take that down now. And so what I'm going to do is now share my book that I said I'd share. And first of all, when I wrote this, what's important is I created an outline. I don't know if you can see that, but it is an outline. And anytime, I just want to say, anytime when you're beginning your own thoughts about your memoir and all, create an outline. What do you want to say? You'll change your outline, but at least it'll get you thinking in an objective way about your subjective experience. All right. And then the first time I wrote the book, my husband said, he read it and he said, but you don't have much in it. You're just telling your experience. He says, what was it like? How did you feel? What was your environment like? It was just all, this happened, this happened, this happened. And then finally it was like, he helped me to create the body of it. He helped me to get into my emotions more by saying that. He helped me to remember what it smelled like and what it looked like and what it felt like. So when you're writing, add that. You don't have to be a great writer. I'm not a great writer. It's just you just begin to put those things in, it becomes a better book. It's a picture of me when I was little. That was up in Alaska. That was so. In this book, I was able to put different pictures in, and then you want to create a mood, a feeling level, and I did that by my very first chapter, because I thought I should lay down the foundation of our people. And is it all right if I could read it right now, Bob? Do we have enough time, Andy?
Yeah, we have enough time. We'd look forward to hearing some of your experiences if that's part of what you're going to read.
This one, this is the experience.
Uh-oh, just lost your mic.
This is the experience of the Inupiaq people. So there are places that are in one's memory that seems etched by something other than one's early experiences. Maybe the ancient ones draw them and store them within each Inupiaq's mind. Memories of the winds that dance over the white carpeted tundra in December, when the breath becomes embodied in white wisp of heat trails, only to be swallowed into icy particles chiming in the wind. Memories of the sea clanging aloud at night when the waves turn into ice but still have life. before solid ice takes over and all is quiet, formed into a sculpture of waves, still and soundless. A memory of such coldness that once dreamed of summer days when salmon berries and blackberries are abundant and the tundra is covered with Labrador tea, Eskimo tea. Then there is a memory of living within the warmth of the sun for months, and the wee light graces the landscape in silver gray and then fades into darkness. Deep within the psyche of my people lies an ancient story that is endless and rich with a life of hardiness, bravery, persistence, and a shared creative intelligence to survive the cruelest weather conditions and the vast lands that harbor not only animals but spirits. Yes, there are strange forces that create fears among the strongest of men. This is the land of my ancestry. This is the land of a beautiful people who love deeply and take care of each other and know how to laugh, to cry, to believe, to pray, to share, and to live in the spirit of Ariga. This is a word that truly describes happiness and the joyful spirit that is Inupiat. There are those who exhibit this wonderful spirit, but like the clear, smooth iceberg, deep within the mind, there are layers underneath, strange, complex movements going in different directions from each other. Like the deeper layers of the iceberg, these powerful movements can erupt and without warning, crush whatever is in its path. For the Inupiaq, the challenge is to conquer not only the land, but also the depths of the mind that can erupt with such strong emotions that it can and will cause pain to ourselves and to others. That's the beginning. And then from there, I go, this is my mother's land. This is the way she grew up. And this is a picture of her in her parka. Her name was Elizabeth or Ivalu. And your mother is very important. I learned from a very wise American Indian from here. I said, well, what culture am I? I'm white on my dad's side and Native on my mother's. And he says, you follow your mother's tradition because that's the one that's conveyed to you. She's the one that's closest to you and will convey that culture. And even though later my mother was to deny her culture, she did live a very cultural life. And I can remember her saying how cold it was up there in Alaska, where she was from, Kivalina, Alaska. She was born on a fishing boat. Can you imagine that? An open fishing boat, not a nice luxury liner, just one of those plain open ones. And they were going whale hunting, and her mother had to do the work right after that. So there my mother is born on this fishing boat. And in June 10th, they're going whale hunting. And so she lived in Kivalina. And she said, oh, I remember it was so cold sometimes. I just wish I had a warm blanket, just really, they had furs, I guess. But she said, I just was always just really cold, cold, cold. And so my dad, Charlie Maxwell, who came up on, he traveled all over the world. He left his home when he was about 12, 13 and started hopping trains, ended up in China and all over the world. And when he was 39, he met my mother, who was only about 17. And he was the storekeeper in this little Inupiaq village called Kivalina. And he probably looked for the prettiest girl in the village and asked her to be the housekeeper there. The aunts didn't trust him, and so they always came with her. And then finally he asked for her hand and they got married. And then things started to change. My mother, this is a picture of her changing now. You can see her short hair and a dress, like American style down here. And she we lived in Nome, but my sister Teresa and I got tuberculosis, and my mother started working when we were in Nome, and I had a very mean babysitter when she was gone, who was quite abusive. So that was the beginning of some of the traumatized pain. And then there was drinking and alcohol in that scenery too, when my mother had to go for an operation and all. And so we then had this problem with my other sister getting tuberculosis, and she moved to California, and pretty soon our whole family moved down there to California, and I got TB also, besides diphtheria. There was some kind of abuse when I was about 3 or 4, and it's in the book. And then when my mother was out again working, and I stayed in the hospital for a year, transferring from a little village of Nome now to Los Angeles at Santa Teresita, run by sisters, and they took care of me. And the story just goes on from place to place. I stayed there, and then we moved to Salem, Oregon. And my dad was so poor, and we finally got a barn. He got a barn, and he started to fix it up because it was in such a, well, it was a beautiful location. As a child, you don't think of those things, but I loved it. And he fixed it up, and we lived there. And he was a plumber, so he had to have plumbing tools. So he bought a hearse. So now we live in a barn, and we drive around in this hearse, and we get really embarrassed. And so we were so glad when he took the curtains out, so it didn't look like we were arriving. And all these kids would pop out of the car at church. And then my parents got divorced, and then I went to foster homes, and there was that. But there were places where it was incredibly happy, and my life was alive. And the story goes on from place to place, and the trauma of that. But along the way came the introduction that I wasn't like I thought I was, like everybody else. And then you begin to see the lines of prejudice that started to happen as a young girl living in Salem, Oregon, where it was mostly all white. And I just thought I was like everybody else. And I couldn't understand why I'd play with somebody on Monday or all week, and we'd be best friends and hugging each other. And then I'd stay every night at their house, and then I'd come back on Monday, and they wouldn't run around with me anymore. And this continued to happen. And there were just so many stories of prejudice. And I never knew why, because I didn't know. I wasn't like everybody else. When you're young, you're not taught those things. And my mother chopped off her hair, and she was wearing suits now, and she was trying to fit in so well. And yet this was happening. And that becomes very traumatizing, because one begins to look at themselves and say, you're no good. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with your personality. Why do people stop running around with me? I, as a child, could not put it together that it had to do with the color of your skin. It was just that, your skin and your dark hair. And so this whole thing that happens to races is a traumatizing effect. And one has to deal with it, and one has to come in terms with it, because otherwise it just continues to rob one of who they think they are. And when you're isolated from your community of the Inupiaq, I was isolated now, and I didn't remember all the things about my people, except the food. I love the food. I love salmon berries, and I love what they call muktuk, that part of the whale. And I love dried fish, and I love seal oil, and all those things. I'm always writing to my relatives up there, could you please send me something? And so that's what the story is about. And then finally, going into high school, and it's a lot of letters, and it's still trying to fit in, trying to be white, but not even putting those terms in it, because I never did. I just thought I was like everyone else, but I couldn't understand the rejections. It wasn't later, much later, that I learned about it was you weren't. You were white, half white, but you weren't full white, and therefore you were not accepted. And then there were problems later in my career as a Native American, not being Indian enough and working with Indians maybe, and not being Indian enough. And then there was that rejection too. And I remember my daughter who went to Haskell, and she also, well, one of the schools she went to, and they were teasing her and they said, "But you're so white." And see, she was much brighter than I was. And she said, "Well," she says, "it's important to be white, because then when people in wild animals up there chasing you, you can blend in with the snow." So anyway, she learned how to get around it. Those kind of things finally lead to the climax of the book, and that's where I internalize all the trauma, the sexual abuse when I was quite young, barely remembering it, the alcohol abuse, the going from foster parents, the abandonment issues of being in a hospital for a year with sisters, and all of a sudden leaving your village and now into a big city. All of that climax when I was right after high school, and this major depression, and how the spirits were just saying, "You gotta leave, you don't belong here," as I said before. And then this incredible experience that drew me out of it, and how nature healed. And then finally after that experience, and I've had other experience there at Mount Hood in Salem, out of Salem, out of Portland, that I finally felt this integration and this leaving of the depression. So why don't we leave it at that for now? Oh, and then finally, I have to say, finally beginning to come back to my own roots, my native roots, as well as the white roots that where I was planted was all white. Now I started returning to the native roots as well, and the teachings, and asking my mother, why didn't you teach us our language? And, and when I'd ask her questions like, well, what about this or that? And she'd say, why do you want to ask those things for? You see, she had been traumatized too. And so she wanted to forget them. And that was her story. So how about we take a break here? It feels like we could, and I need a glass of water. And
wonderful. Thank you, Catherine. I need for myself, I need to catch my breath. And I would welcome Annie, Zach, or anyone else that would like to start off with some, just comments, questions, thoughts, sharing. I've made some notes about what's going to be my book. Thank you for getting me started on that. but I'd love to hear other folks join into the conversation.
Annie?
Yeah, this is really an open forum. So I will say that, it really struck me, Catherine, the way that you brought in that telling one story is more than just relaying events, to really look at context, and both an external context, right, and also internally what's going on. So I thought that was a really powerful thought, and I just wonder if anyone might have a question for you as well. It was a rich sharing.
I have an observation.
Yes.
I've known Catherine since college. Hi, Sam. And it's interesting. And then we had small children together, and then kept in touch throughout the years.
Pam.
Yeah, hi. But it's interesting to me to see how her writing this down brought so many things out that weren't on her mind in those years. Yeah, you weren't even aware of that stuff very much when you were in your early 20s.
I didn't share them.
Okay. I mean, we shared a lot of things, but evidently not that. So, I mean, it's really fun to be getting to know more about my dear friend. So I'm glad to be on this call. And you are motivating me to write my stuff. So thanks.
Thank you.
I can't see your face, Pam, but it's good to hear your voice.
It's but Noelle, she's pinned right now. So does that restrict her? Does that restrict her from seeing the gallery view?
Remove spotlight.
Okay.
There we go.
And
Can you see her now, Catherine?
Catherine, can you see all of us now?
But here's my husband, Sean. I want to introduce John. He's been standing on the outside.
Wonderful.
This is John. This is Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Greetings, John.
And there's a whole lot of people
Greetings.
there. Zachary.
Catherine, if you want to, do you have gallery view there so you can see everybody? Catherine?
In the upper right-hand corner.
Do you have a gallery view?
Participants. I have something called participants.
No, in the black square, in the big black square, there's a thing that says view in the top right corner. And you can put it on gallery view or speaker view.
Put it on gallery view. You'll probably be able to see your friend Pamela.
There you are. There you all are.
Okay, great.
Oh, Alice. Alice is there. Alice Atuk. Hi, Alice.
Hi, Catherine. So wonderful to see you. Looks like
So good to see you. She's
Yeah.
from Nome, Alaska. No, where are you now, Alice?
Fairbanks, Alaska.
Good. Good. And Pam. There you are. Okay, wonderful. Okay, I asked.
Catherine, we have a couple of, Noelle had a comment or a question.
We have someone, a good friend of mine, Margot, and I want to read what she wrote in the Facebook chat. She said, I spent time in Nulato, N-U-L-A-T-O, am I saying that right? Alaska, N-U-L-A-T-O, Alaska, studying and getting to know Athabaskan neighbors and ceremony of the stick dance. Are you familiar with the stick dance? Maybe she's in a different part of Alaska. Anyway, she had a wonderful time there.
That's good.
But she also has a question. She wants to know if you liked fish ice cream.
If I like fish ice cream,
Yes, did you ever have that?
we call it where we were from. We called it Eskimo ice cream with salmon berries. I like it.
Wow.
So I guess that'd be a little hard to send in the mail to you.
It would mail. I'm afraid it would mail, but tell her I'll take the dried fish if she wants to send me some.
Well, she's freezing in Wisconsin
Yeah,
now.
she's freezing
but,
up there in Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
She said that when her sister-in-law is writing a book about her time in Alaska.
Wow.
But one of my questions, ever get back to the native language? How preserved is the language there? Are there a lot of the language?
So I'm going to have John answer that question about is the Alaska language still spoken quite a bit up there?
Yes. most of the villages are pretty remote still, and most of the people in the villages speak the language, but you know, there's a number of different ethnic groups up there. And Eskimo, there's at least 3 or 4 different kinds of Eskimo groups up there, including the Athabascans, which are considered Indian. So there's been a big push over the last 30 years to preserve the language. And they've been quite successful. It's pretty much in the schools. And of course, a lot of the older people still speak it.
So in public school, John, would both the native and English be taught as a part of a typical formal school system?
English primarily, but they have, and you know, there's like close to 220 villages in Alaska, and they're all very small and they're all remote, and they each have a school, and they're very small schools, and there's usually a cultural component in each of the schools, but the primary language, of course, is English.
Sure.
And the teaching is done in English.
Right. Thank you. Elsie, did you have something?
I don't have a question for Catherine, but I have something to share very, very quickly, if that's okay. I wanted her to know that I have a photo. I don't know if you can see. Can you see this?
Yes, that's great. Right there. Hold right there.
That's my great grandmother. And my great grandfather. My great grandmother was a full-blooded Cherokee. And they lived in West Virginia. And my maiden name was Gordon, which is Scots. And, the Scottish came and settled near where Bob actually in the Smoky Mountains, near where Bob and Noel are now, and intermarried with the natives there. She married this grandfather's last name was Hicksenbaugh, so she found a good German man to marry. But what I wanted to share with you is that as I've gotten older, I've become much more attached to my native. It's not nearly as strong as yours, with having a mother who was full-blooded, but I'm much more appreciative of my indigenous background than I was when I was younger. My family never talked about the connection to the natives. It was never discussed. My father was in World War II. There was alcoholism in our family. There was a lot of drama, just lots and lots of things that you were describing, just different context, I'm sure, different story. But Grandma used to come after Grandpa passed away. This is what I wanted to share with you. She used to come and visit my grandmother, her daughter. And I was never very close with Grandma Gordon. I was more so with my mother's mother, who was a farmer, and I stayed with her when my dad was in the war and that kind of stuff. But Grandma Gordon, first of all, Grandma Gordon, whenever she would cook, every meal she cooked fried potatoes. If we ate at the house, we had fried potatoes at every meal. And Grandma Hicksenbaugh, when she came to visit, she would come and stay with them. And what I remember of her most is that she would come to the dinner table or lunch table, whenever it was that we were there. She never spoke. I don't remember ever hearing her speak. And my sister, one of my sisters said, of course she didn't speak, Alice. She had esophageal cancer because she smoked a corncob pipe. And she also dipped snuff. And so the thing that I remember most about her was that she would go to my grandma's bedroom. She had her legs wrapped. She obviously had conjunctivitis or whatever in her legs. And she would sit in this rocking chair sort of in the dark. And she'd sit there with this corncob pipe. And you could see the smoke, coming up from the corncob pipe. And every now and then she'd reach over and she'd dip and she'd put that, across her top gum, you know, under her lip. And she would just sit there quietly and smoke and dip. And she was an absolutely fascinating woman. She comes to me now, though. I wanted to let you know that I know when Grandma is here. And I published a book 2 or 3 years ago, and she was on the dedication page because she'll come when you were talking about your heritage. She was here. I'll hold my hand out, and I know she's holding. That she's here, and she holds my hand. And she came to me through a person who reads for me, and said she wanted me to know at one time that she was really pleased that someone in the family was willing to acknowledge the heritage, the Native heritage. But she is an incredibly special person. She was not someone that I was especially close with when I was growing up, but she had a tremendous impact. I mean, I can still see her. It's as if she's sitting in the same room when she was there.
I want to make a comment on a couple of things. First of all, please tell her hello from us.
I will.
I'm honored to hear this story, and that as you were telling it and you were describing, you were going back and forth with your grandmother, and I was thinking, what a beautiful way you are telling the story now. If you can write that out, how beautiful. I could just see the corn, pipe and all. So
yeah, I should do that. I've not written the story. I do have a basket, though. I went to the Cherokee Reservation in the Smoky Mountains. I have a basket downstairs that was made by a Cherokee woman whose name was Elsie.
And I want to say, there's something I'd like to add to this. And Pam, I need to go back to you on something. I just thought of something. But first of all, to Elsie, it's true. When you're older, your roots begin to come back, and you're being more open to them. And there is that spiritual connection with our ancestors. I mentioned that I'm getting goose pimples. I mentioned that I was part Jewish. I was taking just recently, within the month, a class to learn more about my Jewish heritage. I never met my grandmother like you. I never got to really know or talk to her on my dad's side, but she was Jewish. And so in this Jewish class on Zoom, I was taking the class, and one of the women said, "Have you received your Jewish Hebrew name yet?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And I said, "My grandmother's passed." And she said, "Well, it will come." And I thought, wonderful. And so I said a little prayer. And then about a week later, I had the wonderful experience of a voice booming out and saying, "Your name is Anya, Anya, or Anya." So I looked it up. It truly is a Hebrew name, and it means God's grace or graceful. And it comes from Hannah or Chana, who was Samuel's mother. And so we are connected. We can't see them, but as Father Niger always told me, he said, you're closer to those who have passed on now because there's no body impeding you. So now I have a Jewish name and I have an Eskimo name, and I'm Native and white in one breath, and I'm very proud of that now. And now, Pam, I've got to answer that question, because I started thinking and I thought, you're right, Pam, I didn't talk about that. I mean, all the memories were there is what I meant. The memories were there, but I didn't talk about it because I was so much in denial. I was so completely in denial about my race or being different. That didn't happen until, it always happened when I was little, but I still couldn't figure it out, Pam, why people were rejecting me. It didn't occur to me because of my skin color. It never did. And I remember
my little bit of Native American, I just connected with you. I mean, I probably have this much Native American, and yet that was a level we shared on, so I don't know. Just interesting.
yeah, I was very much in denial. And remember how I married a blonde hair, blue-eyed man, because I thought, that was the truth. I wasn't saying consciously I'm white, but I lived in a white dominant society. So I wanted to be that until I realized there was something going on. And I was able to explore that deeper and later. And that's another story. That's another book. Anybody else who would like to share any?
Yeah, we welcome others. One thought I wanted to share, well, two thoughts I wanted to share, and we'll hear from others as well. Noel has something. First is, I really appreciate this whole conversation and the life that you've lived and that you're bringing to life for us tonight and in the book. Because for me personally, and for us, I think, it's adding to an ever increasing awareness of the connection that we have of the beauty of the diversity of our nation. And we have been very blessed to be a part of the Unity Earth activities for the last year and traveled to the Holy Land and a lot of activities through this year have gotten to know a number of Native Americans who are standing very tall, very strong, and unbelievably beautiful in their bringing the heritage to an awareness for so many, including the two of us. And it's really been, I just think about my awareness of Native Americans and even knowing people that are quote half or full or whatever a year ago compared to now is just been exponential. And it's really been a great appreciation. And through this year of tragedy and awakening in our nation, of everything from Black Lives Matters to political environment that and all of that is an awakening. And we've learned so much about Native Americans, indigenous in the world, but also Native Americans, and are listening more than ever, watching more documentaries and learning more about history, which I really was bored with through all of my grade school, high school, and college, because I thought it had no relevance to my life. And so this has been a very, very exciting evening. Completely separate thought was, I appreciate your comments about your book and carrying us through the development of your book. Like I said, I was actually writing some notes as you were talking about that for myself, and appreciated that your journey in this book was to write the facts about your experiences through life, and then the spirit of it was breathed into you with conversation with John, your beloved, to say, now there are the facts. Where's the feeling? Where's the emotion? And we all, by reading that story, where it has both the facts and the emotions, it's such a rich way of experiencing it. Because I'm the type of person, I'm a planner, I'm a thinker, I'm a doer, I'm an engineer. I would have a tendency, if somebody said, you got to write your book of your life story, I would write, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So I really appreciate that advice and sharing that journey with us. So thank you so much, Catherine. Noel?
I have a question from someone on Facebook, and they want to make sure they have the name of your book, and they want to know where they can purchase it.
Thank you. I will post it on Facebook under Catherine Swan Reimer. I have a page there. I decided to self-publish because my first book was published by a different press, and it was just a horrible thing that happened. I think they were selling it for $56, and I was making like $1.84 a book. But it wasn't so much that, it was they had control over it, and finally pretty soon they went out of business, and China is selling it now. I have no rights on it. It went to an ebook, and it's so very expensive for people to buy, and so I decided to self-publish. So it's you would mail a check to Catherine Swan Reimer, and it is $24 with shipping and posting, $19.95 for the book, and then the other. And it is P.O. Box 225, Chewelah, and I'll spell that, Washington, CHEWELAH, Washington. And because you're on this program, I will be selling it for $20, including my shipping. I'll take care of that. So it won't be $24. For this group, it'll be $20. Just remind me. Okay.
Remind us the name of the book again,
It's
Catherine.
Chrysalis, native.
Yes, it's
What's
the
this?
Chrysalis, native and white in one breath.
Gotcha.
Okay. And I want to save time for John, but I would like to go over a few things and then we'll go back to your theme. So on a planning outline, if you decide to write your book, the theme, mine was, what was it like to be native and white in one breath? Okay, and the denial of my native side for so long because of living down here. Okay, the purpose, share the trauma of prejudice on the psyche and how nature heals her children. So that was my purpose. Play with the title. Okay, it was native and white and with one breath, and John added the metaphor, the chrysalis. Okay, create an outline, make it loose. Right away, create your outline. I'm writing another book on called Cosmic Consciousness, Jungian style. And so in that, I wrote the whole outline in one morning. I just kept writing and writing, and those ideas came. So put your memories, if you're writing your memoir, under the outline. Just when you remember something, put it there where your outline was. Have a page maybe for each chapter of that outline and add things to it. And feel the times, the environment, as Bob said, your own feelings. Put that back into them. I have one in the book called My Time in Salem, Oregon, when I was a young child. And it's full of the memories, the richness of being in the woods and things like that. And I loved writing it. I just became a little girl again, just remembering it. It was wonderful. And create a story. You are the storyteller. So this book, even though it's my memories, there is a story there and it leads up to the climax. If possible, focus on a tension in your life leading to a climax. We all suffered. That's your tension. What was it? Go into it. Feel it. Go into it deeply. It could be a life event that changed you. Those are always God's graces underneath that, because we're starting to loosen up the things that bind us, those things that hold us. What is your hope to leave as much of your history, your life? What is the hope of this book? Who do you want it for? Is it just maybe for you? And write with a purpose, and above all, put some passion into it. He kissed me. Put some more passion than that. Okay. And also write with, integrate the medicine wheel that I shared with you. And so get that, all those things. And if you need I could email this to Bob and he can share it if you want. I got it on my computer.
Okay.
I'll do another
And,
shift.
and I know we have 15 minutes, and Zach, did you want to?
We lost. Have others lost Catherine's audio?
Yeah, we can hear you,
Audio?
Catherine.
We're having trouble hearing you, Catherine. Having trouble hearing you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I really love this diagram that you did. And it actually kind of, I don't know, it just mesmerizes me for some reason. Now, did you do this based on your life, or did you do this based on Inuit, your native upbringing, or how did it come to pass?
It came from the research I did. One of the wonderful things that happened when I went to George Washington University to get my doctorate was that I chose to study our people. What was it? first of all, there's a story to that. I was fishing up in Seward, and I was first time coming back since I was a child to Alaska, and I'd been in Seward when I was a child, and I was so happy. I was so happy that I was there. The mountains were so beautiful. The sea was so beautiful. It was such a clear day. And I love fishing, and we were fishing for salmon, and I caught one of the first salmon on our boat, but I wasn't even looking. I was looking at the mountains, and I was just going, oh, look at that mountain. Oh, look at this. And then the salmon comes on, and it just lays there motionless, kind of being dragged in. And somebody said, you know why you caught that? And because everybody had been trying. And I said, no. And they said, because you're in a state of ariga. And I went, ariga? What's that? Because remember, I hadn't been with my people at all. Well, it turned out that it means very happy, joyful, one with everything, good spirits, just full of life. And that was the spirit of ariga. And I wanted to know more about it. So when I chose my dissertation topic, I chose I've got so many papers going in my mind, what personal well-being, the Inupiaq's understanding of personal well-being and wellness. And so after I did the research and after I started doing training, like I said, the medicine wheel that we were using didn't fit it. But when I showed this, people could agree with that. Yes, we are in those categories much more. And so that's where it came from my research. And I was 55 when I came back to get my do my dissertation up in Alaska. And the first place I chose the villages that my mother came from, Point Hope and Kivalina. And I went to Kotzebue where I was born. And I was just amazed at how wonderful I was treated. And because I was a relative and they said, who are your parents? And as soon as I said that, it was just lots of hugs and happy feelings and being welcome and kindness. And it was just beautiful. And then later I did my research on what is the relationship between spirituality and alcoholism at the University of Fairbanks, where I was teaching in the summer, and I met Alice Atuk, and we worked together. And Alice gave me that wonderful stick. It had the 4 colors on it, and it represented what the Indians did when they were fighting. They would plant their stick in, and they could be killed there. And she was encouraging me to do that paper and planting my stick in there. And I still have that stick, Alice. So I'm still writing.
Wow.
So
I have one follow-up question, Catherine. Well, actually 2. One is, what's your zip code?
Yeah, we didn't get that in the chat for your address.
99109.
Say it again.
99109.
99109.
Gotcha. And the city is spelled Cheweleh.
Cheweleh, Cheweleh. It's an Indian name.
Got it.
Okay, my follow-up question is, what was that word you said? How do you spell that word you said when you were like in the state of bliss?
Aregah. Ariga.
Raegah. And so it kind of means
Aregah.
I like that. I want to go there.
Is that the correct spelling, Alice? Is Alice still here?
I think I would put Ariga. Ariga.
Ariga. Okay.
Ariga.
Yeah, the G is sounded a little bit different from a regular G. Ariga. But it could be Ariga.
Okay. Well, we're going to research that because Noel wants to go there. Now, we definitely want to hear from John and about his book, but just before we do that, is there anyone else that would like to put their voice, spirit, and comment or anything into the conversation? Lydia, Tex, Sheila, Alice, others we haven't heard from yet.
Zach.
Hi, Tex.
I would say that it's been fantastic. I know and love Catherine and didn't know all of these things. So,
Oh,
so it's been
Lydia.
interesting. It's been real inspiring. I had started doing some memoirs, so now I'm inspired to do more, but I'm struck by the idea of story and how we each have our story, and yet we connect or rub up against each other and bounce off each other with all these different stories. And it's just like all these molecules like moving around. Sometimes they join together and create a new substance, and other times they repel each other, and it's just pretty fascinating. So
Lydia, I didn't recognize you. You look great. I love your hair. It looks like it's blonde. She used to have black hair.
Yeah, it's gone. I let the silver grow in.
I see that. You said that was happening. Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'll let John sit here then. Okay.
Zach, did you want to share something? Get your mic there.
Unmute. Can you unmute him?
The thing that came across to me tonight was there's really only one story. Catherine happens to be a Native American, but the things that she went through, all of us share. The suffering, the ups and downs, and the joys. This is a human story. That's what made it so relatable. This could have happened to any of us. It has happened to the young Mexican children at the border who've gone through so much trauma. You know, that's what resonated, I think, has moved this group and so deeply, is that Catherine's story is our story. That we've all suffered. There's no color to suffering. There's no black suffering. There's no white suffering. Suffering is suffering. And redemption is redemption. And thank you, Catherine. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. I'm good.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you so much.
John,
good to have you with us.
Well, thank you. I'm pleased to be with you and be able to have a few minutes with you. I'm thankful for that. Catherine said I could talk to you a little bit about the book I've written, and I'd like to do that. I won't take very much of your time.
Fantastic.
But, I'm in the process of finalizing a book. I'm also doing self-publishing, and I didn't want to go the other route of doing the commercial route. Not that I could have done that anyway. So we have a small publisher in town in Spokane who's been very helpful to us so that we could self-publish, and I'm grateful for that. Anyway, the title of my book, and it's in the final stages right now. In the next few days, the printer is going to have a copy for me in book form so I can take a look at it and make the final changes. But the book is titled "What's in Your Head and on Your Mind." Subtitle is a narrative describing how, what, why, and the way we think and act the way we do. So how I got started was thinking to myself about this whole notion of core values and what we believe. And I said to myself, just what do I believe and why do I believe what I believe? And I started writing little notes down. Pretty soon I was at the computer, writing things, and it went on from there. And I thought about what are my core beliefs? How do I separate my core beliefs from the trivial? And I kind of went from there. In other words, what is the ground? What is the soil? from which these things spring for me, and by extension, other people. So that's how I got started. But I wanted to, if I can, just read a couple of things from from my book that would give you some kind of an idea of what the book is about. I do have a Native American perspective throughout the book, and so that's kind of the basis. But what I did is I sought to examine, understand, and interpret, and then speculate how and the ways that we humans believe, think, and act, since what we believe, how we as members of that single species of hominids think, and why we think and act the way we do, and which is pretty much determined by a number of factors, both internal and external. So this is a work of a series of essays whose theme is grounded in that speculation. So I use a layman's perspective. This isn't a research book. It's not I didn't spend a lot of time doing heavy research on it. It's more from my own perspective as a layman, as a common person, and I tried to write it that way. So from a layman's perspective, I ask and explore the following. What is the ground? What is the soil from which our intellect arises and grows? Can I, and by extension others, objectively and reasonably define what it is that we believe and why we hold certain beliefs, thoughts, and concepts that get lodged in our heads, that become the drivers of our person, that we have become and who we think we are? And then I speculate on, can we even go beyond and change our own subjective thoughts and beliefs, both conscious and unconscious, and be able to see the way things are, absent our own perceptions, absent our own interpretations, absent our own beliefs and our own myopia? I wanted to share with you the last part of the conclusion of my book. I write, in conclusion, somewhere along the road that got us to where we are now, we have shed the long-held and humankind protective notions of sharing, caring, helping one another, the individual's responsibilities to others, the advantages of collective action and support that ensured the welfare of all the members of the group, that also ensures the welfare of the individual. We marvel at all that we have done, and some of us even believe that we are an advanced people. Then why have we failed so miserably to take care of each other? We who represent the only living species left on this Mother Earth, Homo sapiens, so-called the wise ones. And the last part of my book concludes in this way, and I'll explain why. It may very well come down to this. We are at a crossroads. We have to decide which road we shall travel. One takes us downhill, a dead end. And if we continue to travel it, there will come a time of no turning back. The other road we may take will continue to take us uphill, back onto that slope we began climbing eons ago, way back when, as we slowly shed the fog of unknowing. Our destiny has been interrupted, and there is hope that we may continue our uniquely human journey as we have from ancient times to the present. Only it'll be a new path that we now see laid before us, and we must take it. We will then resume our journey, and we will evolve to a place and time when the bad and evil within us are slain, and the good and the beautiful is laid before us for everyone to see, to hear, to touch, and to feel. We will finish the work began in the beginning that was left unfinished. We will lift up justice, which slipped through the cracks of creation, from the depths, from the abyss, to its proper place, and all of life will sigh in relief. And if you read my book, you'll see why I came to that conclusion.
Thank you, John.
And-
What beautiful words, what beautiful sentiment and inspiration. Now, tell us one more time the title of the book so we can have it in the chat and we'll keep that.
The title will be What's in Your Head and on Your Mind.
What's in your head and on your mind.
In your head.
Great. Thank you so much for
On-
sharing, John. And I got to say, you two really inspire me. Here your eighth decade and you're both writing and publishing books. I feel like, wow. And so beautifully shared.
What
It's
I
really-
loved about part of the book is he goes back into history with the Neanderthals and what's that other group? The other group of human, they weren't humans, but they were close to becoming, and what took place. And all through the book, he threads that story into it. It's fascinating how he does that.
Wow.
I found the Neanderthals very interesting once I started doing a little research on it. Our cousins.
Wow. Well, good. Well, keep us posted on when it's published and available. In the meantime, we have some comments. Would it be okay if I share them with you?
Go ahead.
Okay, from text, he'd like to say to John, from John, I think he highlights the need for true love in action, collaborative solidarity of peoples in community. So I agree. Thank you, Tex. And we also had from Sheila, she is saying to Catherine, I find Catherine's story mesmerizing and love hearing the personal experience of bringing to life the real lived history of Indigenous people.
And Tex also shared in the chat on Zoom for Catherine, I feel Catherine's story inspires hope that one can heal from one's tribulations or potentially traumatic life experiences. Also, the need to reconcile with all aspects of one's identity or cultural heritage. So beautiful. Thank you. And Annie, you had a note in here. We don't need to say it for you. If you want to jump in, maybe you could help wrap us up too. This has been a delightful time. Oh, but there's more from Facebook.
There's more. So let's see. Someone on Facebook called you a dynamic duo, and a message for Zach from someone on Facebook, my good friend on Facebook, Margot. She says, tell Zach that sounds like a great title for his book. There is no color to suffering, is what you said. There is no color to suffering. So she wants you to produce that book. She thinks that's genius.
Your homework assignment, Zach.
Yes.
We'll check back with you next Thursday.
And one other, when we were talking about that word ariga, we have a good friend who is she's Japanese American, and she is saying that ariga in Japanese means thank you. So just another, that's good. You were thanking the universe out there when that salmon said, hey, I'm waiting for you to catch me. You were too busy looking at the mountains, but the beauty. So this has been delightful. But go ahead, Bob. I just want to turn it back to you.
You bet. Annie?
Well, we're just so thankful and so blessed to have you presenting as elders that have just walked your talk and lived such a rich journey, and to have you encouraging all of us to share our stories is just really so heartwarming, and I hope it will inspire. I'm sure it is inspiring many to reflect more on that. And you know, that's about the nuts and bolts of it, but that's also about the spirit of it, and you've really brought that in so beautifully and inspired us tonight.
Thank you so much, Annie and Zach, for bringing this delightful dynamic duo.
Again, we want to thank everyone for being a part of this evening's joy and this evening's inspiration. It's been delightful to have you, Catherine and John, to be with us.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.